$248,000 a month. Not a settlement, not a one-time payment. A monthly demand for child support filed against one of the most recognizable actors in American cinema, and the woman making that demand refused to explain herself in open court. Kevin Costner had spent decades being the face of something larger than entertainment. Field of Dreams, Dances with Wolves, The Bodyguard, Yellowstone. His name carried the weight of American mythology, and for 18 years, his marriage to Christine Baumgartner carried the image of a man who had finally built something stable after years of wreckage. Then in February of 2023, she found something hidden in his car. Not a phone number, not a receipt. Something that exposed a secret he had folded into the structure of their life together. Something so damaging that 2 months later, she walked into a courthouse and ended everything. What she discovered explains the $250,000 monthly demand, explains why she bought a $100,000 Porsche on their joint account the same month she found it, and explains why she stayed silent under oath. None of that story begins in a California courtroom, though. It begins in Compton, in the late 1950s, with a boy who was too small and too quiet and too displaced to imagine that any of this would ever be his life. Linwood, California, January 18, 1955. That's where Kevin Costner entered the world, the youngest of 3 boys, though one of his brothers never survived past birth, and that absence settled into the family, like furniture nobody acknowledged, but everyone walked around. His father, William, climbed slowly through the utilities industry, following wherever the job pointed. His mother, Sharon, spent her working hours helping struggling families keep themselves together. Money moved through their life without staying, and the family relocated, constantly chasing William's employment, from Compton through Orange County, Ventura, Visalia, and back again, never planting long enough for roots to catch. Compton during the late 50s and early 60s offered Kevin an education no classroom scheduled. Street fights broke out the way other neighborhoods hosted block parties, and at 5'2" through most of his early teens, he absorbed those years carefully rather than confidently. Every new school meant starting over socially, rebuilding from zero, which meant he mostly stopped trying to build anything at all. Football and choir became his anchors, not out of passion, but because they provided structure when everything else felt temporary. Poems he wrote in private got hidden where nobody would think to look. That habit of concealment started early. Villa Park High School is where he finally graduated in 1973, unremarkable in every official record, but carrying something unspent he hadn't yet figured out how to use. California State University Fullerton came next, and marketing felt like the responsible choice, the kind of major a person picks when they're trying to be practical about a life they haven't yet decided to live. That changed in 1975 when he boarded a flight and found himself seated beside Richard Burton, one of the most respected voices in the history of the English-speaking stage and screen. Burton looked at this quiet marketing student and told him directly that something about him could work on camera. One conversation, one sentence from the right person at the right moment, and the entire practical plan dissolved. He joined a community theater group with zero formal training, graduating in 1978 with his business degree intact, but acting already consuming every ambition he had. Cindy Silva became his wife that same year. His first paid screen credit arrived in 1981 with Sizzle Beach, USA, $250 for weeks of shooting and barely a presence on screen, but enough to confirm the direction. A small trucker role in Night Shift in 1982 followed. In between those appearances, he ran lights, built sets, handled backstage logistics, essentially paying to stay in proximity to the industry until proximity paid back. In each small role, he improvised human details that made background characters feel like they had lives extending beyond the frame. And people in the industry started noticing the quality even when the roles hadn't earned noticing yet. And that's when something almost fatal interrupted everything. In 1983, a decade before The Bodyguard reached theaters, he auditioned for the project, and during a drowning scene, an actress began going under for real. He dove in and pulled her out. The incident could have ended his career by ending him entirely, but what it produced instead was a certainty that the industry's dangers would never push him out of it. By 1985, broke but focused, he formed a production company with friends because he wanted eventual control over the westerns he had been dreaming about since he was 7 years old and watched how the West was won in a California theater. Late nights went into thinking about stories he would direct someday. And that ambition kept moving him forward through years when most people around him had already stopped. 1987 arrived, and the acceleration was sudden. The Untouchables cast him as Elliot Ness opposite Robert De Niro's Al Capone, and $3 million landed in his account from a $20 million production. The shoot carried real danger. A train explosion burned several extras, and when the production's disregard for their safety became apparent, Costner nearly walked off the project in anger. No Way Out opened that same year, a thriller that cost $15 million, earned $35.5 million domestically, and stunned audiences with its twist ending. His clashes with Gene Hackman during production grew heated enough that the director physically intervened to keep filming from collapsing. Two major hits back-to-back, and Hollywood adjusted its opinion of Kevin Costner whether it wanted to or not. Bull Durham came in 1988 and showed something nobody expected from the dramatic leading man who had just dominated two thrillers. Warmth, loose, unforced charm. Many of his most celebrated lines, including the famous belief speech, were improvised entirely in the moment. $50 million on an $8 million budget confirmed the instinct. Then Field of Dreams in 1989 asked audiences to believe a man builds a baseball diamond in an Iowa cornfield because a voice told him to. Costner believed in the premise without calculation. When the ending failed and the studio declined to fund reshoots, he covered the cost himself. 22 theaters, $531,000 in its opening weekend. Then word traveled the way genuine emotion always does, and $84 million worldwide later. Kevin Costner had become something beyond a movie star. A Hollywood Walk of Fame star arrived that year as well, but inside the marriage to Cindy, the lights were already going out quietly. Dances with Wolves carried into the 90s as a personal mission the entire industry told him was a mistake. A 3-hour Western about a Union soldier who finds his truest self among the Lakota Sioux, filmed across 5 brutal months in South Dakota where blizzards froze cameras and crew members worked through sub-zero wind. Sioux elders were brought in to ensure every ceremony, every word spoken in Lakota, every cultural element was accurate rather than approximated. $3 million of his own dollars went into the $19 million budget. A real Buffalo stampede injured crew members and drained money from an already stretched production, and Costner refused to replace the animals with effects because the story required the real thing. 12 Oscar nominations followed, and 7 wins came with them, including Best Picture and Best Director, making him only the second person after Orson Welles to claim both for a directorial debut. $424 million worldwide. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves pulled in over $390 million in 1991 despite critical attention paid to his English accent. JFK that same year put him opposite Oliver Stone's camera for a 15-minute courtroom soliloquy breaking down the Zapruder film, earning 8 Oscar nominations while generating controversy historians and critics hadn't finished arguing about years later. Around that same period, he turned down Pretty Woman because that film would lock him into a softer image than the one he was building, and Dances with Wolves had already shown him what choosing the harder path could produce. The Bodyguard opened on November 25, 1992, and the numbers were almost difficult to process. $401 million worldwide. A soundtrack selling over 18 million copies, entering permanent cultural memory in a way few film scores ever manage. His creative disagreements with Whitney Houston over script rewrites complicated the production, and those tensions showed up in the footage in a way audiences found magnetic. A Perfect World in 1993 under Clint Eastwood's direction gave him one of his most emotionally layered performances, earning a Golden Globe nomination and $104 million worldwide before settling into respected cult status. Wyatt Earp in 1994 is where the slide started. $72 million of his vision, real locations, and real gun choreography and shootout sequences stretching past 10 minutes, a running time beyond 3 hours, and critics who had been patient with his ambitions ran out of patience publicly. A $25 million loss at the box office. Whispers that he had attempted to obstruct the competing film Tombstone during production. The industry began attaching the word ego to his name, and that same year his divorce from Cindy Silva became final. The settlement reported near $80 million. Bridget Rooney announced in 1996 that Costner was the father of her son Liam, born in November of that year. He denied it. A DNA test confirmed it in 2002. The more damaging detail wasn't the child itself, but the fact that he had not disclosed Liam's existence to Cindy before the test forced the truth into daylight. A reported $15 million settlement followed, a trust fund was established, and Costner remained largely removed from Liam's life for years. The tabloids had found a version of Kevin Costner that bore no resemblance to the man who mortgaged his own savings to reshoot the ending of a film about ghosts playing baseball. Waterworld in 1995 consumed everything around it. Planned at $100 million, the production spiraled to $175 million after hurricanes destroyed Hawaiian sets. And with marketing, the total reached $230 million, the most expensive film ever made at that point. A floating atoll weighing more than 1,000 tons had to be transported in pieces. Costner earned $250,000 per day, which bred resentment throughout the production, and director Kevin Reynolds clashed with him so intensely that Reynolds quit before completion. $264 million worldwide sounds large until placed against what the film consumed, and the industry coined a nickname that followed him for years, Kevin's Gate. The Postman in 1997 finished what Waterworld started. He directed, produced, and starred in an $80 million post-apocalyptic story, opened it on Christmas Day directly against Titanic, and earned $17 million domestically. Critics treated it without mercy, and he stepped back, turning toward polo and environmental causes while waiting for the industry's anger to metabolize. The recovery was methodical. 13 Days in 2000 placed him inside the Cuban Missile Crisis as Kenny O'Donnell, and he studied original White House recordings before a single day of filming began, earning $66 million worldwide. Open Range in 2003 brought him back behind the camera for a Western filmed on the Stoney Indian Reservation in Canada alongside Robert Duvall, real cattle and real weather shaping every day on set. Man of Steel in 2013 gave him a tornado sacrifice scene as Jonathan Kent that he filled with ranch-born authenticity. And his 2 minutes in Batman v Superman 3 years later generated more emotional discussion than many full performances in the same film. By 2004, he had married Christine Baumgartner on his Aspen ranch after a brief separation the year before. 3 children followed, Caden in 2007, Hayes in 2009, and Grace in 2010. The ranch life looked exactly like what the public expected Kevin Costner's domestic life to look like. Court documents filed years later told a different story, one involving therapy sessions and emotional distance that their combined wealth couldn't reduce. Yellowstone flipped his career's trajectory starting in 2018 in a way few television roles manage for actors of his generation. As John Dutton, a Montana ranch patriarch holding his land against developers, politicians, and his own family, he performed his own horseback riding scenes into his late 60s. His salary climbed to $1.3 million per episode, giving him $18.2 million for the 5th season alone. And that's when it cracked. Negotiations for the second half of season 5 collapsed after he requested $12 million for the remaining episodes, and the studio responded with pay cut proposals. He stated publicly that legal action was possible if agreed terms weren't honored. Production stalled. The finale was delayed, and his involvement ended in 2024. Horizon had been living in his head since 1988, a 4-part cinematic epic about the settling of the American West that no studio would commit to on his terms. $38 million came out of his personal savings. Land got mortgaged. A $100 million film assembled itself on personal conviction and personal credit. The first chapter premiered at Cannes on May 19, 2024, and the domestic opening weekend produced $12 million. Critics acknowledged the ambition while pointing to length and pacing as problems, and the comparison to Waterworld arrived in reviews within hours. The final 2 chapters remain unfunded. Costner says he will finish them regardless. In 2025, stunt double Devin Labella filed a lawsuit accusing Costner and his production company of forcing her into an unscripted physical altercation during Horizon Chapter 2 with no intimacy coordinator present and no prior warning. His team denied every claim. Courts refused to dismiss the lawsuit in October 2025 and allowed it to proceed. The union confirmed safety protocols had been violated, and Labella was not rehired. Then February of 2023 arrived, and Christine Baumgartner found something in Kevin Costner's car. The secret he had been managing inside the relationship became suddenly visible in whatever she held in her hands in that moment. She bought a Porsche Cayenne worth more than $100,000 from their joint account that same month, a purchase his legal team later argued was the opening move of a planned exit. On May 1st, 2023, she filed for divorce and listed April 11th as the separation date. In court, she refused to explain what she had discovered. She demanded $248,000 per month in child support. Costner offered $63,290. After a two-day hearing in September of 2023, the judge accepted his number. Court filings revealed $90,000 in cash advances she had withdrawn and $25,000 in legal fees charged to a shared card. The judge ordered her to repay $14,370 of his legal fees. A full settlement was reached in September of 2023, and the divorce became officially final in February of 2024. Costner has 7 children across 3 relationships: Annie in 1984, Lily in 1986, and Joe in 1988 with Cindy Silva. Liam in 1996 with Bridget Rooney, kept from public knowledge until a DNA test made silence impossible in 2002. And Caden, Hayes, and Grace with Christine Baumgartner. Christine accepted a marriage proposal from financier Josh Connor in January of 2025. On a Santa Barbara beach, Costner told reporters he had no intention of marrying again and that his focus had moved entirely toward his children and toward finishing Horizon. 70 years old, $38 million of his own dollars committed to an unfinished film. A marriage of 18 years dissolved over a secret nobody outside that car has named on the record. 7 children. A career that touched more cultural high points than almost any actor of his generation. And underneath all of it, the Compton kid who hid his poems where nobody would find them, who watched westerns at age 7 and decided to ride into a different life, who paid for reshoots out of his own pocket because he believed in the ending, who mortgaged land to build the film no studio wanted. Whether Horizon becomes his final vindication or his final cautionary tale, he will complete it. That has always been the only consistent truth about Kevin Costner. When he decides the story needs finishing, no amount of financial loss or industry mockery or private wreckage has ever been enough to make him stop.